Hey traders, how's it going? Nick from Vant Trading here, coming at you with what is hopefully going to be a quick, entertaining, and informational video on Swift. I'm going to be talking about what is Swift. I'm going to be defining it, giving a little bit of an overview here because we've been getting a lot of questions with the heightening of tensions between Ukraine and Russia and the actual agreement at the EU community and US on starting to implement Swift sanctions on Russia, that people don't quite grasp exactly what it is and the purpose of Swift and why it's such a big deal that the global community actually agreed to this. It's something that has come up before in the community with Russia heightened during the annexation of Crimea, and also we have several other countries that have been banned from Swift. So I'm going to be talking in a general sense of what is Swift, what the potential impact on Russia could be if these sanctions persist, and hopefully by the end of what is going to be hopefully a short video, you'll have an idea of what this is and the impact that we could see. So first, let's just start with the general, well, what is Swift? And again, I'm not going to be diving into the rules and regulations and financial infrastructure here. I just want you to understand that Swift is the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. Aren't acronyms fun? And if you looked at some of those words and you're able to piece together in your little brain what this might mean, is it's just a financial messaging infrastructure for banks across the world. Obviously, within a domestic country, these banks, the U.S. banks can communicate with each other easily. They can send money back and forth easily. You can just wire to each other. It's usually within the same currency anyway. But we're talking globally here. We're talking maybe across currencies, multiple different currencies, assets, regulations across countries. And this is not a way of actually handling the money transfer. Swift does not touch the money. They're not a bank. They're not a financial institution in that sense. They're more of a middleman. They handle the messaging between these financial institutions. Prior to Swift, the only real method that these banks and institutions could use was telex. It was the only means out there of messaging for international funds transfers. It was slow. It was very unsecure, and it had a lot of other issues that led it prone to human error. So obviously, when we're talking billions of dollars in currency, millions of messages a day interbank, because we have become a global economy, let's not kid ourselves here, that is stuff that you really don't want. You want speed, you want reliability, you want security, and you want to eliminate the human element as much as possible here. And so then Swift came in, and now it is a powerhouse. It is run by the member banks, and the member banks are generally the larger ones. You've got the National Bank of Belgium, U.S. Federal Reserve, Bank of England, and those people here. Now, like I said, they don't actually touch the money here. What they're doing is they're actually helping transmit the transfer requests to each other and the information. The actual movement of the money itself generally is going to be touching multiple banks before it reaches the final destination. But what Swift is doing here is ultimately ensuring that everyone knows where the money is supposed to be going, and they're dealing with the messaging here between all of these institutions, because the money doesn't necessarily just go from one bank to the next. There's generally a lot of stops on the way, especially if we're talking foreign currencies changing hands between different countries. So it's ultimately going to help make sure that everyone knows where the money needs to go and keeps things secure. So it could be a big deal, and it's a very large group. And like I said, it's not just for banks, however. You've got brokerage institutes, trading houses, security dealers, clearing houses, asset management companies, exchanges, Forex. There's a lot of different financial bodies and institutions, not just banks, that use Swift. So it's actually a very large group here. And we're talking a lot. We're talking 42 million messages on average from last year of daily payment instructions. That's a lot. We're talking 200 countries, some territories, over 11,000 financial institutions all around the world use Swift to communicate and send these financial messages, because money is changing hands all the time, every second. I can't even imagine how much money is changing hands across countries, and most of them use Swift when dealing with foreign countries. It is estimated that a little over 1% of all of those messages and so on include Russian entities and banks. There are 2 countries currently that are cut off from Swift. You could probably guess them. It's Iran and North Korea. When Iran was cut off in 2012 as an agreement from the rest of the world, they were cut off from Swift as a sanction due to their nuclear program advancement. It is kind of estimated that Iran lost 30% of its foreign trade. So make no mistake, Swift can have an impact. This is a very interconnected global economy we have here. North Korea is kind of its own thing these days anyway, so I don't even know what the impact could have been there. But this is going to be a big deal, and a lot of people are referring to it as a nuclear option in terms of sanctions. And there was a lot of back and forth in terms of whether they should do it, and people were balking, and no one could really agree. But it seems like we're actually going to be seeing a little bit there. So, what is the potential impact of these SWIFT sanctions, of cutting off Russian financial institutions from being able to use this communication system with foreign institutions, foreign banks, and global banks? Well, we're likely going to be seeing targeted SWIFT sanctions are going to be likely the first step. And it's not going to be a blanket cutoff here, because if you haven't known or haven't paid attention, let's be honest, the majority of Europe and a lot of the world still need that energy and that natural gas and that oil from Russia. So they're likely not going to be targeting any of the institutions that are going to deal with that exchange, because they can't just cut that off cold turkey. It would cause some serious political repercussions and blowbacks for a lot of those countries. So, but there are going to be targeted SWIFT sanctions on a lot of Russian financial institutions. Now, technically, if they do this and they cut off the Russian banks from being able to effectively communicate with foreign holdings, and where they hold offshore money and assets, and be able to do global trade here effectively, there are technically alternatives that exist. This isn't the only system out there, but it's none of them are as widespread in use. So Russia, after the 2014 threat of cutting them off from SWIFT, started to create their own system. It's not that used. About 23 foreign banks use it. So let's be honest, it's not going to be something that can just plug and play here. But there are other alternative systems that are used at very small degrees. A lot of people are saying, well, Russia can just use crypto. It's decentralized. There's no central system that can shut down the use of crypto. However, people need to realize that Russia is very, very lightly involved in cryptocurrency, especially cryptocurrency transactions and exchanges with banks. They're just starting to really toy with the idea of really widespread using it. And even then, there does not seem to be a consensus within the country between the head of banking in Russia and the politicians on terms of, should they really use crypto? But they could technically turn to cryptocurrency. So you do see that discussion going on right now. Now, like I said, in 2014, we actually saw this threat of SWIFT action during the annexation of Crimea. And at the time that this happened, the then finance minister of Russia said it would actually reduce the Russian GDP by the end of the year by 5%. Russia is about, I want to say, the 12th largest economy these days. A 5% hit to their GDP would be felt. It would be impactful. It could cause a recession at the right time. So it definitely could have impact. So it would certainly cause immediate pain to Russian financial institutions. It could potentially limit their war chest, which is definitely part of the focus of these sanctions. So there could be some economic impact felt, and that's why a lot of people are saying it could be a big deal. There are arguments that, these days with, since we've already threatened this before, Russia has been doing things to shore up and try to limit the impact if this were to ever happen again. So they've built up a large war chest. They hold relatively small debt. And also they've cozied up with a little country called China. And a lot of people are worried that if we do impose some serious SWIFT sanctions, it would then further strengthen the ties between Russia and China, which could then ultimately start to weaken the dollar-ruled financial system in the world. China does have its own kind of system that it would be able to use to communicate with Russian banks, and China is still very largely connected to the global economy, so there could be a little bit of an intermediary with China. So whether that's going to happen, whether then the global community would pressure China to not work with Russia as much, who knows? This is still very fluid. These SWIFT sanctions have not been sent out yet. They are just finally being agreed upon and discussed. But this is something that you need to know and you need to pay attention to if you trade the markets, or even if you just pay attention to global politics. So hopefully that has informed you a little bit. Again, these were kind of broader strokes that I painted here. I'm not diving into the nitty-gritty, but we get so many questions here about what is SWIFT really. And now it's just a method for global banks and financial institutions to communicate and request payment and send the information as to where payments are supposed to go. And it's secure, it's fast, and it's very widely used, which is the biggest thing there. There are so many users that what is the alternative? Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. I appreciate you all for tuning in. Be sure to check out our YouTube, our podcast, Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, and our morning market analysis. We've got a lot more stuff coming down the pipeline soon, so be sure to keep in tune. We'll give updates on our YouTube and on our Twitter. But we will see you next time. I appreciate you all for tuning in. Good luck out there, and as always, safe trading.